It is a warm, calm afternoon here in Pensacola, Florida, and the air smells faintly of salt from the Gulf. I can hear the gulls calling from the shoreline, and somewhere in the distance, the soft hum of a fishing boat drifts across the water. The sun is sitting low, painting the horizon in gold and amber, and my sister, Sophia, is sitting beside me on the porch swing, sipping from a tall glass of iced tea. We don't talk much in moments like this. We don't have to. Just the fact that we can sit here, in plain daylight, without fear of someone recognizing us, without whispers chasing our footsteps, is more than enough. Sometimes I catch myself thinking about how ordinary it all feels now, walking down the street without a veil, greeting strangers without calculating whether my smile will be used against me. Ordinary, yet so precious, because we know exactly what it cost to reach this point. It's been 8 months since we arrived here, and every morning still feels like a borrowed miracle. Florida was never a place we dreamed of. We didn't even know where it was on the map before our journey began. But now, the tall palm trees and wide streets have become part of our days. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, Sophia and I look at each other and almost laugh at how far we've come, not just in miles, but in the kind of life we get to live. We are alive. And more than that, we are free. But the peace of this place always has a shadow behind it, a shadow shaped by memory. My mind often wanders back to the place we used to call home, a fishing village in Sindh called Mirarora. Back then, our lives moved to the rhythm of the azan, the call to prayer echoing from the mosque at dawn and again at dusk. The streets were narrow, lined with crumbling clay houses, and dust clung to the hems of our dresses no matter how carefully we walked. Women carried metal pitchers balanced on their heads as they returned from the well, and men gathered in front of the tea house, sipping sweet chai in small cheap glasses. Sophia and I would walk together to the madrasa each morning, our black scarves wrapped tightly around our hair, our hands clutching small wooden slates for Quranic lessons. We had no idea then how fragile that world really was. Our mother, Khadija, was known in the village for her cooking. She taught us to shape flatbreads over the open fire, to grind spices into a smooth paste, and to make lentil stew so thick you could scoop it with your fingers. I can still smell the smoke from the kitchen fire that always clung to her clothes. Father, his name is Malik Rahman, was a fisherman, strong and weathered from years at sea. He could pull in heavy nets with his bare hands, and at night he would sit cross-legged on the mat, telling us about the currents and the stars. He was strict, yes, but proud of us. When guests visited, he would often say, "My daughters are my honor," and Sophia and I would glance at each other, half shy, half pleased. We did everything together, cooking, sewing, studying. Our small room at the back of the house was our refuge, where we whispered about our dreams after everyone else had gone to sleep. Sophia wanted to see the city lights of Karachi. I wanted to feel the sea wind from a place where no one knew my name. We didn't talk about leaving Mirarora in any real sense. Leaving wasn't something girls like us could even imagine. Our world was the village, the mosque, the market, and our family. That was all. Or so we thought. It was in the late summer of last year when the rains came heavier than anyone could remember. The Indus River had swollen far beyond its banks, and our little village of Mirarora was caught between water and mud. Several houses near the river collapsed entirely, and the streets turned into streams of brown, moving water. For days, the air was thick with the smell of damp earth and rotting crops. Father spent most of his time helping other fishermen pull their boats to higher ground, while Mother and the rest of the women cooked whatever dry grain we still had, serving it to families who had lost everything. That was when she appeared, Rachel. I remember the first time I saw her as clearly as if it were yesterday. She stood at the edge of the mosque courtyard, a foreign woman in a simple blue shalwar kameez, her hair tied back under a scarf that didn't quite cover her blonde streaks. Her skin was pale, and her Urdu carried the softness of someone who had learned it later in life, but her smile was warm in a way that didn't feel like charity. She had come with sacks of rice, jerrycans of clean water, and small packs of medicine. The children gathered around her quickly, their bare feet splashing in the shallow water as they called out for biscuits and sweets. Sophia and I weren't supposed to linger. Mother had told us to fetch more firewood, but we couldn't help slowing our steps. Rachel noticed us almost immediately, her eyes meeting mine for a brief second. She didn't rush over or press anything into our hands like the others. Instead, she nodded as if to say she saw us, really saw us, and that was enough for now. Later that afternoon, when I returned with Mother to collect some lentils from the aid distribution, Rachel was still there, kneeling to speak to an elderly man who had lost his home. She spoke gently, her hands folded, listening more than she talked. That alone made her different from most outsiders who came through. It was on the third day of her visit that she spoke to us directly. Sophia and I had been helping carry food packages to a small family on the far side of the village. On the way back, we found her sitting under the neem tree near the well, sorting medicine into little paper packets. She looked up and smiled. "Would you like some cold water?" she asked in careful Urdu. We nodded, and she poured it for us from a flask she carried. The water was crisp and clean, unlike the cloudy well water we were used to. It felt like a small kindness, but one that stayed with me. Over the next few days, she would greet us whenever we crossed paths, never forcing a conversation but always making space for it if we wanted. Sophia was the first to speak more than a few words to her. One afternoon, as we helped her distribute soap and flour, Sophia asked why she had come all the way to our village. Rachel didn't hesitate. "Because God's love is for everyone," she said simply. I remember the way she said it, not like a slogan or a lesson, but like a truth she lived by. A week later, when most of the floodwaters had receded and her work was nearly done, Rachel asked if she could tell us a story. We were alone then, sitting by the river bank where the air was cooler and the only sound was the gentle lapping of the water against the mud. She opened a small, worn book, the edges of its pages frayed from many hands turning them. It was written in Urdu, but the title was one I had never seen before, Angel. She told us it meant gospel. That day she read us the parable of the lost sheep. Her voice was steady as she spoke of the shepherd who left his 99 sheep in the open country to go after the one that was lost. I listened, but something in me shifted as she read. I had heard many lessons at the madrasa, but none like this, none that spoke of God as someone who would search for me, personally, even if I was the only one missing. Sophia's eyes glistened as Rachel closed the book. She didn't tell us we had to believe. She didn't demand we agree. She just said, "You are love. More than you can understand." We didn't speak of it that night, not even to each other. The risk of being overheard was too great. But in the quiet of my own heart, I carried that story like a secret flame. Sophia later told me she did the same. We both knew, without saying it, that whatever this was, it was dangerous. And yet, we couldn't stop thinking about it. It began quietly, like the slow changing of a season. The floods had gone, and the heat had returned to Mirarora. Rachel was preparing to leave, but before she did, she found a way to meet us without drawing attention. She asked if we could help her carry some blankets to a family living near the far edge of the village. We knew that area well, past the date palm grove, beyond the dirt path where few people went unless they had to. That was where we started meeting her. Not often, just once every few days, always with a reason that could be explained if anyone asked. Sometimes she would bring a packet of biscuits or a small bar of soap as if we were still helping with flood relief, but what we were really there for was the quiet. Away from the eyes and ears of the village, Rachel would take out that little Urdu Bible and tell us more stories. She spoke of Jesus healing the blind, touching the lepers without fear, and forgiving the woman everyone else wanted to stone. There was something about those stories that pulled me in. I had grown up hearing about prophets, men who brought laws, rules, commands. But the way she described Jesus, he wasn't just a prophet in her words. He was someone who saw people, who lifted them up, who called them by name. I didn't say much at first, but I listened like someone thirsty for water. One night, I had a dream so vivid it still feels more like a memory than something my mind imagined. I saw a man in white standing on the shore, his feet in the water. The sea behind him was calm, though the sky was heavy with clouds. He looked at me, not just at my face, but deep inside me, and said only two words, "Follow me." His voice was gentle but certain, and when I woke, I could still hear it echoing in my chest. I didn't tell anyone, not even Sophia. It felt too sacred to share just yet. For Sophia, the turning point came in a different way. One afternoon, Rachel had told us that we could talk to Jesus like a friend, anytime, in any place. That night, after Mother had fallen asleep, Sophia whispered into the dark, asking for his help with something she'd been carrying quietly, a deep sadness that she never spoke of, a sense of never being enough no matter how hard she tried to follow the rules. She told me later that when she prayed, she felt a peace so deep it brought her to tears. It was not the fear-driven relief of avoiding punishment. It was the kind of calm that felt like being held. We didn't talk openly about these things in the daylight. In the village, our lives carried on as before, the cooking, the sewing, the trips to the market. But inside, something was shifting. The prayers we recited in Arabic felt heavier now, almost distant, while the words we'd heard from Rachel, words of love, forgiveness, and hope, felt alive. It was as if the air around us had changed, and once you've breathed that kind of air, you can't go back to holding your breath. Still, we were careful. No one could know what was stirring in our hearts. The cost of being found out was not just rejection, it was death. And yet, even with that shadow hanging over us, the thought of knowing him more was worth the risk. It was a late afternoon, the kind where the air feels heavy and the smell of fried fish from someone's kitchen drifts through the lanes. Sophia and I had gone to help Rachel carry 2 jute sacks filled with flour to a widow who lived near the edge of the date grove. We didn't stay long, just enough to drop them off, share a few quiet words, and head back before anyone noticed. But we didn't see Harun. He lived in the house with the green door, just before the path curved toward the mosque. Harun was a man who noticed everything, not because he cared, but because gossip was his way of buying importance in the village. He stood there in his white kurta, leaning against the doorframe, his eyes following us. I remember how my stomach tightened when I saw him. He said nothing, but his mouth curved slightly, and I knew that look. It was the kind a man wore when he'd found a story worth telling. That evening, after the Maghrib prayer, the Imam came to our house. His name was Maulana Karim, a tall man with a thick beard and a voice that could carry over the whole market. From my place in the kitchen, I heard him greet Father with the usual "Assalamu alaikum" before his tone dropped into something heavier. I couldn't make out every word at first, but then I caught phrases: foreign woman, Bible, Christian stories. My hands froze over the bowl of dough I had been kneading. Father's voice rose quickly. "Who told you this?" "I saw them," Harun's voice came from the doorway. "Twice. And others have noticed too." There was a pause, and then Maulana Karim said, "If this is true, Malik, your daughters have left the faith. You know what that means." The room seemed to grow smaller around me. Sophia had stopped sweeping in the corner, her eyes fixed on the floor. Father's reply came slow at first, then sharp. "They are my daughters. My honor. If they have shamed me in this way, he didn't finish the sentence immediately. There was just the sound of his breath, heavy and uneven. Then he spoke again, his voice like stone. They will not see the morning. The Imam murmured something about it being the right thing to do, about cleansing shame. They spoke in low tones after that, but the words had already carved themselves into me. My ears rang. I could feel my heart thudding hard enough to make my chest ache. Sophia met my eyes for just a moment, and in that glance, everything was clear. This was no warning, no idle threat. The decision had been made. That night, the air in our house was too still. Father didn't speak to us. Mother avoided our eyes. When we lay down in our small room, the sounds of the village, the barking of dogs, the creak of the windmill, felt sharper than ever. I could hear Father moving around in the front room, the scrape of metal against wood, and I knew he was checking the blade of his knife. It is a strange thing, realizing that the people who once protected you could also decide to end your life. There is no preparing for it. Only the instinct to run, to live, to find a way out before the night swallows you whole. The sky had already turned black by the time we decided we couldn't wait until morning. Sophia sat beside me on the thin mattress, her knees pulled up to her chest. Neither of us spoke for a long while, but the sound of Father's low voice from the other room was enough. We knew he was still awake. We knew the Imam's words would not be forgotten overnight. I reached under my pillow and pulled out the small, torn New Testament Rachel had given me the last day she was in the village. She had pressed it into my hand quickly, her eyes urgent. "Keep it hidden," she had whispered. That, and a metal water flask from the kitchen, was all we would take. We couldn't risk the weight of anything more. When the house finally grew quiet, we slipped from our beds. My heart pounded so loud I was sure someone would hear it. The night air was cool against my face as I eased the back door open. The yard was shadowed, but the smell of damp earth still lingered from the flood. Sophia stepped out first, and I followed, closing the door without a sound. We had made it only a few steps when the dogs began barking, sharp, urgent, and far too loud. My breath caught. A lantern flared to life at the side of the house, and I saw Father's silhouette in the doorway. Then another light, my older brother, Rafiq, stepping out with a rifle slung over his shoulder. His voice cut through the dark. "Stop." We didn't. We ran. The dry grass scratched at our bare feet as we tore across the yard and into the open fields. My legs burned almost instantly, but the fear was stronger than the pain. Behind us, Rafiq shouted again, and then there was the sound of his boots pounding against the dirt. I didn't dare look back. Sophia's hand found mine, and we ran together, stumbling over uneven ground, our breaths ragged and loud in the stillness. Somewhere in the distance, a shot cracked through the air. It didn't sound close, but it was enough to push us faster. I could feel the torn edges of the Bible pressing against my palm as I clutched it tight, whispering a prayer I didn't even have time to form fully, just a plea: "God, get us out of here." We aimed for the old dirt road that led out of Mirarora, the one that wound past the mango orchards and eventually to the highway. There was no bus stop in the village, only in the next town, which meant miles of running before we'd even have a chance to escape. Every step felt like a lifetime. My lungs burned, my mouth was dry, but stopping wasn't an option. The moonlight caught the edges of the wheat stalks around us, turning them silver as we pushed through. Somewhere behind us, Rafiq's voice faded, but I knew that didn't mean we were safe. The village was small, word would travel fast. By morning, there would be more than one person chasing us. Sophia glanced at me, her eyes wide and wet. "Just keep going," I managed to say between breaths. And we did. Running toward a bus that might take us to Karachi, toward a church Rachel had once spoken of, toward a place we could only imagine, but one that had to be safer than the home we were leaving behind. I remember the cold dirt floor of that barn pressing into my knees as we crouched in the darkness, holding our breath. Outside, the crunch of boots on gravel drew closer, the voices of the men hunting us slicing through the night air. I could feel Sophia trembling beside me. Then, in the dim light leaking through a broken wall, I saw her scarf snagged on a rusted nail. My heart stopped. If she moved, the fabric would tear, the sound loud enough to give us away. I reached out, my fingers shaking, and eased it free just as the footsteps passed the barn door. When the danger seemed to fade, we crept out the back and found an old man standing by a small cart, his weathered face lit by the weak glow of a lantern. He was a Christian farmer, and when we told him, in broken whispers, that we were running for our lives because of our faith in Jesus, his eyes softened with both sorrow and determination. He didn't hesitate. He reached into his bag, pressed a small bundle of bread into my hands, and told us which path would keep us off the main road. He knew the risk. If anyone found out he had helped us, his own life could be in danger. We walked for hours, our feet blistered and raw, until we reached a dusty checkpoint. A soldier stepped forward, his rifle slung across his chest, his eyes sharp. "Where are you coming from?" he asked. My mouth went dry. I could feel the weight of his gaze, searching our faces for something: recognition, guilt, fear. I prayed silently, asking God to make his eyes blind to the truth. Every second felt like an eternity. Would he let us pass, or would this be the moment everything ended? By the time we stumbled into Karachi, my body felt like it no longer belonged to me. Every muscle ached, my legs burned with each step, and my throat was raw from thirst. The city around us was alive with noise, car horns, the call of street vendors, the endless hum of movement, but to me, it all sounded distant, muffled, as if I were underwater. All I could think about was finding Rachel. For days, her name had been the beacon in my mind, a reminder that there was still someone waiting for us, still someone who cared. When we finally saw her standing in the shadow of a narrow alleyway, my knees nearly gave out. She was wearing a faded blue dress, her hair pulled back, her eyes scanning the street like she had been waiting for hours. Then her gaze landed on us, and she ran forward without hesitation. "My sisters," she cried, her voice breaking, and before I knew it, her arms were around both of us. I could feel her tears on my cheek as she held us tightly, rocking slightly as though afraid that if she let go, we might disappear. I wanted to tell her everything, every narrow escape, every night spent shivering in fear, but my words wouldn't come. Instead, I just held her back, breathing in the comfort of someone who loved us. Rachel didn't waste time. She led us quickly through winding back streets until we reached a small, weathered building tucked between two shops. It didn't look like much from the outside, but as soon as we stepped inside, I felt something different: warmth, not from the air, but from the people. It was a tiny church, its wooden benches worn smooth, a single cross hanging above the pulpit. A few believers were waiting, their faces lined with both concern and hope. The moment they saw us, they gathered around, laying hands on our shoulders and bowing their heads in prayer. I didn't understand every word they spoke, but I understood the spirit behind them. They prayed for our safety, for strength, for the courage to keep walking in faith no matter the cost. I felt my chest tighten, tears spilling down my face before I could stop them. It had been so long since I felt truly seen, truly protected. That night, Rachel showed us to a small room in the back of the church. There was nothing more than two thin mattresses and a single blanket, but to me, it was the most beautiful place in the world. For the first time in weeks, I lay down without fear clawing at my heart. The sound of the city faded into the background, replaced by the soft murmurs of prayer drifting from the front of the church. I closed my eyes, letting the weight of exhaustion pull me under, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I slept. I sat with Sophia in the dimly lit room of the safe house. The hum of the ceiling fan was the only sound for a long while, until she pulled out the little torn New Testament Rachel had given us. My hands trembled as I opened to Psalm 91, a passage we had read so many times in whispers back in the village, afraid someone would overhear. This time, there was no need to whisper. My voice broke as I read aloud, "Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty." Tears blurred the words, but I kept going, clinging to each promise like a drowning soul clings to a rope. Sophia's hand gripped mine tightly, her head bowed as if she could press every word deep into her heart. When I finished, we both sat in silence, the reality of the journey hitting us. We had lost everything, our home, the people we had grown up with, the very world we knew. In the eyes of our family, we were already dead. But here, in this small room with peeling paint and the faint scent of candle wax, we felt alive in a way we never had before. That evening, Rachel gathered the other believers in the safe house, and she asked us to share our story. At first, my voice trembled, but the more I spoke, the stronger it became. I told them about the night we decided to follow Jesus, the threats that came after, the long nights of fear, and the narrow escapes. Sophia spoke too, her words simple but piercing. We lost our family, our home, our village, but we gained eternal life. Some in the room were weeping. Others nodded, their eyes shining with understanding. We weren't the only ones who had paid a high price for our faith, but maybe our story could remind them, and ourselves, that the cost is worth it. That night, before sleeping, I whispered a prayer, "Lord, we are yours. No matter where you send us, no matter what we face, we will not turn back." I think back to the dusty roads, the barns, the fear, and I realize how far God has brought us. Two sisters who could have chosen safety by staying silent, but instead chose life in Christ, even if it meant walking straight into danger. We lost everything this world counts as precious, but we gained something it can never take away. And to you watching this, I want to say, please, pray for those still running, still hiding, still holding on to Jesus in the shadows. Support the underground ministries that risk everything to bring hope into places where faith can cost you your life. If you are searching for the truth, don't stop. Ask God to show you, and be ready for the answer.